Hi, everyone. A number of years ago, I was at a drasha workshop focusing on the Yamim Noraim, and the teacher who was leading this particular session urged us to consider what the major themes of Rosh Hashanah were. There were some great responses, and many of them resonated with me at the time. One that didn't, but seemed to jump out to me this year, was the topic of nepotism. When you think about it, we're going to spend a tremendous amount of time focusing on why Hashem should do what He does for our betterment, because of who our parents were. In Avinu Malkeinu, we cite every merit from everyone who ever lived before us. Our davening, and especially the piyutim, focus on zechus avos, on the merits of the forefathers and the matriarchs who gave up so much for us. Doesn't that sound like we're calling a little bit towards preferential treatment to you? I mean, even the parsha we read this Shabbos, after the 2 days of Rosh Hashana, Shabbat Haazinu, we're still told, Shal avicha v'yagetcha, go ask your forefathers, ask your fathers, they'll tell you. Again, we seem to be stressing that earlier generation. What about us and what we've done lately? Nowhere is the call for nepotism more blatant than the use, and I dare say the overuse, of the Akedah as a merit for you and me today. I mean, frankly, the entire Rosh Hashanah symbolism leads us right there, whether it's the Torah reading on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, or the shofar, which is connected to the Akedah as it's reminiscent of the ram from the Akedah, or the tefillah that keeps invoking it. Nowhere more blatantly than in the Zechronos section of the Musaf, we recite both days of Rosh Hashanah, when we explicitly declare V'akedas Yitzchak lezaro hayom berachamim tiskor, that God, you should recall Akedas Yitzchak as a merit to his children. Why all the call to nepotism? Is it honest? Is it fair? To me, I believe perhaps we're missing something in the shuffle. I mean, seriously, if Rosh Hashanah and Akedas Yitzchak are here to teach us about nepotism, then Avram Avinu frankly didn't get the memo. Stop and think about that for a minute. Avram was the same person who debated and tried to outdeal God in order to save the despotic cities of Sodom and Amorah. He heard that the evil people there were to be killed, and he didn't accept that verdict until he was out of, frankly, bargaining chips. But when Hashem came to him for his holy, unique miracle baby Yitzchak, Avram Avinu all of a sudden doesn't put up a fight at all. What happened to the concern for the family over there? What are we supposed to make about that? People of Sodom, yes, but your own family, no. But that's not even the greatest question I have about the Akedah. Now, you see, I'm troubled as to why it is the greatest merit we call upon when we are involved with God in our tefillah. Frankly, when Avram Avinu went to the Akedah, he didn't sacrifice Yitzchak. The Malach was directed to stop him. There were others throughout history who were not stopped. They sacrificed their children al Kiddush Hashem. One woman, somehow famously known as Hannah, who was a widow with 7 sons, each of whom was murdered by Caesar for refusing to bow to Avodah Zarah. Well, according to one version in the Medrash, as she hugged her last child, who according to the Medrash might have been as young as 2.5 at the time of his execution, well, she told him to go to Avram Avinu and tell him that while he made 1 Mizbeach, she made 7. And he was only tested. He went b'nisayon. She actually practically lived the challenge. And frankly, lost all 7 children. She engaged in Masa. So she says to Avram Avinu, hey, you only did this. I did that. And with great chutzpah, I dare say she has a point. Frankly, why do we call upon Avram and Yitzchak for a Kiddush Hashem attempt, and not instead on those who actually lived through it? But I wasn't the only one who was bothered by the woman's challenge. Rabbi Elazar Menachem Manshach, Panovitcher Rosh Yeshiva, also couldn't understand how a person, in the moment of her greatest Kiddush Hashem, would play one-upsmanship on Avram Avinu. Just didn't add up. And his difficulty led Rav Shach and others who have offered similar answers to a fascinating insight. Says Rav Shach, the woman wasn't challenging Avram Avinu. She was showing him what his actions brought forth throughout destiny. When trying to figure out how she had the strength to handle the overwhelming test of Kiddush Hashem that she was facing, she anchored herself in the actions of Avram Avinu. At the time of the Akedah, Avram didn't know that he wasn't going to actually sacrifice Yitzchak. He proceeded anyway. His Mesiras Nefesh for Kiddush Hashem, his absolute dedication to sanctify God's name, served as a model for her to be able to ready to accept Hashem's message and decree as well. She got her strength and her resolve from him. You see, throughout Jewish history, Jews have shown heroic dedication to Hashem in the face of incredible challenge. And each time they turn to Avram Yitzchak at the Akedah, Sha'al avicha v'yagetcha, we say, as a model for how we, as dedicated Jews, dedicate our entire essence to Hashem. Rav Hirsch Meisels wrote about an incredible shaila that he was asked on a particular second day of Rosh Hashana during the terrible Shoah. And a German action was declared, and the Nazis erected a selection of 1,400 teenagers who were going to be allowed to survive. But in the greater part of the camp, the rest were going to be led off to slaughter. And as a father approached Tzvi Hirsch to ask him if it was mutter for the father to redeem his son and bribe a guard to make sure his son survived, when that actual move would ultimately mean that a different team would be selected for death instead. And faced with the incredible question and trying to figure out what the answer should be, Rav Tzvi Hirsch hesitated. The father immediately responded that if Rav Tzvi Hirsch couldn't answer, then it was not simply mutter, and he, the father, would rather sacrifice his own son than go up against Hashem's plan. Rav Tzvi Hirsch stood there astonished, as the next day the father engaged in Siddur Hadin, accepting God's will, calming himself by reminding himself that this was his Akedah moment. And again, who is his model? Avram Avinu. Rabbi Lamb told us of an episode that took place at the Manhattan Jewish Center 50 years ago, as a sofer who came in from Israel to help check tefillin and mezuzahs during Elul told Rabbi Lamb about his son who had died in the Yom Kippur War. Et hakol natati lamedina, he said, I gave everything for the state of Israel and its people, the sofer told him. We find our heroes and our heroines of Jewish history not from nepotism, but rather from those throughout the centuries who were ready to sacrifice their very future for the mission of Hashem. And where did they get that lesson? They got that lesson from Avram Avinu. And it's precisely this that we want Hashem to remember on Rosh Hashana Day and throughout the season. In our current year, there are absolutely no shortages of courage and Kiddush Hashem that exist within all the stories that have been taking place throughout the land of Israel. Just the story of one that comes to mind, Netanel Eitan, a medic in the IDF, who miraculously stopped soldiers in his unit from perishing after they had been badly injured from a Hamas booby trap. He jumped into action to make sure that he could do what he could to save them, only to succumb to his wounds after a terrorist sniper shot him between the eyes as he finished treating his unit's wounded and immediately was able to evacuate them to safety. One man, one story. It serves as a testimony to the literally hundreds of korbanot that have been offered on the Mizbeach of Kiddush Hashem. Our nation's continued strength is built by those heroes of Tzahal who give everything for us and for Hashem. They, their families, their wives, their children, their parents, their brothers, their sisters, they are the ones who continue to provide our strength. And their model, too, is Akedat Yitzchak. Rabbi Lamb used to remind us that the duty of obedience and devotion learned from the Akedah doesn't necessarily have to involve death. When we sacrifice on a smaller level for the needs of Hashem, sacrificing from our money to fund the needs of the community, the orphans, the widows, those down on their luck, we get up and we sacrifice our sleep to make a minyan or to attend a shir or Torah study on our own. When we sacrifice our desire to gossip, when we get involved in petty bubel maisalach, and we turn around instead and take the higher ground, we're also, on a smaller level, demonstrating that we too have learned lessons from the Akedah, and therefore we too deserve to be able to have its zechus, its merits work for us as well. Not because of the nepotism, but rather because of the reality that we get what they got, namely, that a life lived al Kiddush Hashem, a life lived for the sanctification of God's name, is the life of merit and destiny. Wishing you and yours a beautiful and wonderful upcoming new year. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu answer all of our tefillos. May He make sure that Akedat Yitzchak Lizaro Hayom B'Merachamim Tizkar. And may we all experience a K'tiva V'Chatima Tova, a Shana Tova, and a Shabbat Shalom to all.